Now, we are coming closer to the spectacular conclusion of this event, the tag. And I'm very happy to welcome Chef Emmett from the CommonsStack on stage. And he will present us, give him a round of applause. Yay! This is so much. You present us what CommonsStack has in stock for the Commons and token engineering.
Thanks very much, Angela. And thanks everybody for sticking around to the end of Friday of a long week. That's really awesome. I'm excited to see all the smiling faces here. A couple sleeping, but I don't blame you. Cool, so my name is Jeff, and I'm here today to talk about the CommonsStack and the tools that we are building to scale the Commons to reprioritize people and the planet. Do I have a clicker? Where did that go? Here. Perfect. So I think it's first good to establish why are the Commons important. So there are some really big problems on our horizon that we can only solve together. We have climate change, resource depletion, global social unrest, and actually I'm going to add one more up here that was a really great lead-in from the last lightning talk, open source incentivization. These are all public goods that are not that are prone to the free rider problem. So you produce these public goods, and this free rider problem underlies all of these, extraction of environmental resources, of the usefulness of code, for example. So if you haven't heard of that, definitely look into it, because this is basically a large coordination problem that underlies some of our biggest challenges moving forward. There's a lot of interesting talks and research done by Eleanor Ostrom and other commons advocates that say basically we need larger coordination mechanisms to determine social rules over how we allocate these resources. I mean, we have some of these already, but there's something wrong with our current approaches. So we have markets, we have states, these are global coordination mechanisms, but they have some problems. We have one-dimensional economies that maximize for profit, and they optimize out people and the environment. We have outdated governance structures that are reactive rather than proactive with the problems that we face and the speed at which we seem to make more and more problems for ourselves. And we have a lack of global coordination around the resolution of these problems, which leads to a breakdown of cooperation on a global scale. You have nations coming together to resolve climate change, for example, but country A doesn't want to do anything because country B is not going to, and country B is not going to because country A won't do it, and all of a sudden we have runaway climate change and no way to address these issues. But solutions do exist. There are cooperative structures, commons, basically communities that come together around these shared goals, and they create value-aligned economies that value their local communities and their local environments. They have local governance that is a non-hierarchical decision-making, which is really important. But these small communities rely on trust, and trust today is person to person. There's nothing wrong with that, it's a wonderful thing, but it doesn't scale. So we need to be able to scale trust and scale these coordination mechanisms to be able to apply the solutions offered by the commons at a global scale. Luckily, there's this new technology you may have heard of called the blockchain. So we have this opportunity for global trust networks, essentially. We can align economic incentives with these community values. We can give communities economies and allow them to encode their community values within those economies. And by doing this, we can scale these rules of commons into global networks that are protecting our most valuable resources. So this is essentially what the CommonsStack is trying to do. We are trying to scale trust using the blockchain, and we are trying to scale the commons using these components that we're building. So we are building an open source library of blockchain components that enable purpose-driven communities around any cause, whether it be planting trees, cleaning up trash, or producing open source components for the betterment of humanity. And we're giving them the ability to raise and allocate funding, to make decisions, and to measure impact. And this is what a future tech stack for the commons may look like. We have various shelves of tools, from governance to funding, proposal tools, analytics tools, simulation tools, initialization tools, and this list could go on and on. The key here is that these are interoperable modular components, so any project can take the pieces that are relevant to their community, combine them into a token network, and basically create This is almost like an SDK for DAOs. So you can take any of these components, you can interoperably combine them and launch your token network around your community goals. So this is a future vision of the CommonsStack, and we'll zoom in a little bit to where we are looking at, where we're looking at starting this. So we would love to build a minimum viable commons, and we've identified these 4 key components. The Augmented Bonding Curve would provide sustainable funding for communities. The Giveth DApp is providing proposal and escrow service. We have conviction voting, which is a continuous decision-making governance process. And the Commons Analytics dashboard allows us to measure the impact in this community and determine whether we are producing the value that we want to as a community. And we will be launching these in an iterative engineering approach. So we'll be building each component one by one and launching them into a beta test environment, inviting communities to join in and testing out how these components work and seeing how we can improve them in our next code base iteration. Once each of these 4 components are built, we will synthesize them into a minimum viable commons, and we think this will be a new standard in token network design. So the important thing to note about the CommonsStack is it has a rigorous token engineering foundation. So we're not just building these components off of an idea in a white paper, we are starting with token engineering tools and processes like CAD-CAD. So each of these components is modeled from mathematical first principles, designed and implemented, and we are producing a library of robustly designed components that can then be forked and used in any Commons initiative or open source project. And of course, anything we learn from those live deployments, we can collect data and improve our model. So we're turning this into an engineering design process, which is going to revolutionize the entire crypto industry. So the funny thing about complex system design is it's really complex, and anybody who's spoken to Michael Zargam at any length understands that. So we're not asking everybody to start from mathematical first principles, but this is where these components come from. We start with defining conservation laws, then we model these systems in token circuit diagrams, and then we simulate these systems to see where their systemic failure modes are before we even write the first line of code. Now the great thing is you don't have to go and do this mathematical modeling. You can use the CommonsStack components, trusting and understanding that this robust design is already baked into these components. You can just fork them, customize them to your specific community need, and move forward from there. So now that we've looked at the overall system of the CommonsStack, we're now going to zoom in on the first component because each of these is quite a complex component. We could talk for days about them all, and I would encourage you to speak to us afterwards if you're interested in any specific mechanisms. We'd love to dive deeper into any of these. But for the rest of this talk, we'll just talk about the Augmented Bonding Curve, which is essentially a sustainable funding mechanism for your community. And we believe this will resolve the problem of open source incentivization, which the last lightning talk really did a great job pointing out the issues with that. So the Augmented Bonding Curve is a token bonding curve. You've probably heard about these before, with some slight mechanisms to address some of the attack vectors and issues with bonding curves. So as I mentioned before, it provides sustainable funding for your project and community, and it has 2 different phases. There's the hatch phase, which is an initialization period for the bonding curve, and then there's the open phase where it's live to the public. They can purchase, they can sell from the bonding curve. And I'm going to walk through each of these phases and just explain how that works. And let's do that. So the hatch phase is a community crowdfund to initialize the funding pool and the collateral pool behind your bonding curve. So this is different from most bonding curves. Most just have a collateral pool. But by separating these into 2 separate pools of value, we're creating 2 different uses for the token, which brings some stability that we'll talk about in the next slide. I'll show you in a diagram. Sorry, the slide after this one. So essentially a community comes together, this is the hatch phase, and they fund this community pool. So they put in some money into the bonding curve, that money is split by some community determined percentage into a collateral pool and a funding pool, and they're issued some token from the bonding curve. Now this token has 2 purposes, as I mentioned. It is worth a claim on the collateral pool, so you can burn it back to the curve and receive some value, or also, it gives you governance over the funding pool, so you can use this to vote on how community funds are spent. And this is the bonding curve on the right. I'm sure you've seen these before. It's a little bit confusing to look at these because it looks like the price just keeps going up forever. This is actually not a time graph. This is the amount of collateral behind the bonding curve. So as people buy and sell, it can go up or down this curve. So just to correct, this isn't a magic money-making machine. But yeah, this is the collateral, and the price is actually on the y-axis there. So now we're moving into the open phase of the bonding curve. So you can see that as the price goes up, you may expect that people want to sell their tokens. They are interested in reclaiming the collateral behind those tokens. So you have this pressure pushing you down the curve. But then as more and more people exit the economy, the people who are left have all the governance over the funding pool. So there may be other people who want to exert governance over the funding pool. Maybe you have projects that you want to have funded by your community. So there's this opposing buy pressure. So the interplay of these two forces creates volatility in the market in some acceptable range. And that volatility is actually turned into continuous funding through the exit tribute mechanism. So each time someone leaves the community, this is again a preset amount when you are initializing the bonding curve. In this example, we give 10%. Every time someone sells some of their community token, they pay that as a tax into the community funding pool. So this basically ensures a sustainable funding mechanism for this community to continue doing work. So to recap the augmented bonding curve, we are basically creating circular regenerative economies that can be used by any community, any open source project, anyone who wants to coordinate a community around a goal. So we have incoming capital that is split between the collateral pool and the funding pool. We have funds flowing from the funding pool to complete proposals and provide value for the community and perhaps the world at large. In the case of the open source industry, we are producing public goods that can be used by anybody. And you also have exiting capital, which produces this circular flow from the collateral pool into the funding pool. So you have sustainable funding for your community. So this is a narrative showcase of what we can do with CAD-CAD. This is a simulation that we've run up. I would love to run it for you, but we don't have internet here. I'll provide a link in just a moment. But you can see here on the left-hand side, we have all of the initial conditions of this curve, so you can determine the amount that goes into your collateral pool versus your funding pool. You can set the initial price of your token and the post-hatch price of your token. You can determine the amount of your exit tribute, as well as the vesting half-life, which protects the initial initialization period before this community establishes value for itself. And you can approximate how much you might raise from your community. And when you run this simulation, you can get some interesting information about, I mean, this is obviously a simulation, it's not predicting how your economy is going to go, but the green line is the value of your community token, and more importantly, the blue line is the accumulation of funds that is continuously flowing into your community funding pool, which can be spent according to your governance processes on work within the community. So you can see this community in this example has raised 2 million DAI over a 52-week period. So this is just a narrative showcase of what we can do with CAD-CAD. This is before a single line of code has been written in the augmented bonding curve, but we can use simulation tools like CAD-CAD to understand where these systems are going to fail before we even get into the coding of it. So if you want to take a look at this demo, it's up online, abcdemo.commonsstack.org. Feel free to play around with it and see how it can be useful for your community. So now that we have an idea that these augmented bonding curves can provide sustainable funding mechanisms, where can we use it in our crypto space? I mean, we have ecosystem funding DAOs popping up all over the place, and they're targeted towards specific purposes. We have Moloch DAO that is looking to push forward with Ethereum 2.0. Metacartel is focusing on UX. We have art DAOs. We have open source DAOs. We have all sorts of different communities that are conglomerating around causes. And all of these groups could benefit from using the augmented bonding curve as a sustainable funding mechanism rather than just relying on member donations. And there are other challenges we can tackle within the DAO funding, ecosystem funding DAOs as well. So today we have no accountability of funds. If the community says we should fund this work, the money is dispersed, and we just kind of cross our fingers and hope that it gets done. It's not really a sustainable way to move forward with this. We have all sorts of on-chain voting issues all over the blockchain space. That's a fairly hot topic. And we have a lack of impact measurement. So are the proposals that are actually carried out useful for the community? How do we know? Well, this is essentially the roadmap of the CommonsStack. We are building components to address each of these issues one by one, and then synthesizing them into a minimum viable commons that can be easily forked, easily used by any of these communities who want to solve these issues and move forward into an age of decentralization. So we have an invitation for the community today because we've realized that research and development is a commons as well. It's providing public goods for the entire community to use it's non-rivalrous, it's non-excludable, and therefore it falls prey to the free rider problem as well. So we need an ecosystem funding DAO to forward token engineering R&D in the blockchain space. And our invitation to you today is to come together as a DAO to take the Augmented Bonding Curve as soon as the component is available and launch the Token Engineering Commons. And the idea of this is to unite all of the siloed researchers who are doing token engineering research essentially in their spare time. I've spoken with many of them myself. Most of them are getting paid by client work, doing things they don't want to do, and doing token engineering research in their spare time. And I believe this discipline is going to forward the blockchain ecosystem overall into the next level of maturity. And I think the Token Engineering Commons will provide a sustainable funding mechanism for all of those researchers, basically a higher level incentive framework to unite them around the common cause of maturing this industry. So we're going with an old school tranche style raise to fund the development of each of these components. The cool thing is, once we build this is the last time anyone will have to do an old school tranche style raise, because from here on out, we can use the CommonsStack to fund open source development of all of these endeavors. So we have broken this out into component by component and synthesizing this into a minimum viable commons. We are an open source project. We got here to this point through contributions of labor and finances, and we are more than open to contributions from the token engineering community or the blockchain community in general. And we are really excited to start building these components. We have a lot of ideas. We have tested our assumptions. We have simulations. And now we're ready to get moving on building these components and providing these open source tools for the community at large. We have a dedicated, experienced team with decades of experience in the blockchain space and other incredibly relevant fields. And we have some of the top token engineering advisors that are lending us their wisdom and expertise in making sure that we are moving forward in the most judicious way to build these open source components. We also have a very strong legal team who's looking at the future legal framework of DAO ecosystems, because this is, of course, an important entanglement we need to keep our eyes on. So I'm here today to ask you to join the CommonsStack community, to help us help you realign our economies and prioritize people and the planet. And if you would be interested in joining, the link is right here. But before I close out today, we have one more announcement. A year ago, actually, at the first unofficial token engineering global gathering, perhaps, a tool was announced that has the potential to revolutionize the crypto industry by introducing an engineer's loop of simulating, modeling, and testing these systems before we go to code. That tool is CAD-CAD. You've heard about it all day, I'm sure. And our team and advisors think this is such an industry-critical bedrock for token engineering that we completed an internal raise, and we're happy to announce that we are open sourcing CAD-CAD today.
Yay!
Thank you. So jump into the repo, have a lot of fun, and join the the CommonsStack community. We are looking to coalesce a community of people who are interested in using token engineering tools and token engineering practices to move this discipline into a new level of maturity so that we can tackle the biggest issues of our times together. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Great. And thank you to the entire CommonsStack team.